My name is Stephen Leckey and welcome to this short online seminar about mental toughness in the workplace. Over the next 30 or so minutes, we're going to discuss what mental toughness is and then think about a process that can allow you to become more mentally tough. The recent coronavirus pandemic and potentially a lot of you working from home, we're going to discuss some examples and some thoughts and feelings that you might find challenging at home and ways to cope with those, whether it's distractions or doing chores or even home workouts. We're going to give you the tools to be able to cope with all the stories associated with those behaviours and then allow you to complete them. Just very briefly, and I'll give a bit of background to myself. So I've recently completed a PhD in mental toughness and specifically in rugby. And some of it, what I'm going to talk about today will be based on that research, but it will be tailored towards a workplace environment. I'm also co-director in Athlete Focused, and Athlete Focused not only offers psychology support, but also nutrition support in the form of online and free nutrition guides and meal plans. And we also offer online training programs, and we offer physiotherapy consultations online as well. If that's of any interest to you, you can check out our Instagram and our Twitter page, and you can find us at www.athletefocused.com. And then I'm just going to now lay out the next 30 minutes and how it's really going to look. So first of all, we're just going to understand what mental toughness is and what it looks like in the workplace. We're then going to talk about this process of becoming mentally tough, and we're going to speak about that in terms of mindfulness firstly, then acceptance, and then commitment based upon your values. And all of that will become a bit clearer as we go through. And finally then, just throughout, it's about giving you some tips, hints and tips and techniques that you can use to become more mentally tough and resilient in the workplace. So as I mentioned, with the coronavirus pandemic, the workplace now for a lot of us is at home. With that, there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of distractions and things pulling you away from your work. It's important to acknowledge those things, those thoughts and feelings, and also acknowledge the time that we're in a minute. There'll be lots of doubts and concerns around coronavirus in general, and it's important that we acknowledge those and accept that they will be there. But over the course of this presentation, we'll give you some examples of how to cope with some of those challenging stories that might be coming up at home with regard to your work or indeed the pandemic that we're currently in. And as we do that, we think about mental toughness. It's really important then we firstly get an understanding of what mental toughness is. And to do that, I want you to think about that mentally tough employee in your office. What is it that he or she does that makes them mentally tough? Okay, I want you to think about that now for the next 30 seconds. What is it that makes he or she mentally tough? That mentally tough employee in your office. Have a think about that now for the next 30 seconds. Some of the things that may have come up were this person copes really well with their workload. They seem to always be on top of things. They might be quite strong in meetings. There's a whole host of behaviours that you would associate with being mentally tough in your workplace. But it's important when we think about these behaviours, do we think when those mentally tough people are completing those behaviours and doing those things, do we think they think like us, or like when we have all these challenging thoughts and emotions that maybe stop us completing all that work? The answer is yes. We're going to promote the idea that mentally tough people think exactly the same as the rest of us. And it's about, we're going to give you a process how you can work past those thoughts and become mentally tough. So really, mental toughness is just about coping with stress, and stress can come from a variety of places, whether that's workload stress, time stress, stress from relationships, money and failure. I'm going to give you some examples throughout this presentation and link it back to this idea of coping with stress. Just before we get started, it's really important to note that what I'm going to talk about today is just really advice, and it's going to give you some hints and tips around coping with stress. But we should pay attention to the fact that stress, if it's overwhelming and it has been for a period of time, it might be worth seeking some extra support. And that might be in the workplace through a line manager, or it could indeed be through your GP. But it's really important that We're clear that this is advice today, and if things are really challenging and are really difficult and have been for a prolonged period of time, I would urge you to firstly speak to a line manager, and then if required, seek some support from your GP. And as we get into speaking about mental toughness, I want to think about this linked concept of psychological flexibility. And we can think about psychological flexibility just like physical flexibility, in that those who are physically flexible can get into difficult positions, difficult situations, and still remain injury-free, and they can still perform. Much like this, if you're psychologically flexible, you can cope with a lot of challenging thoughts. I can't do this, I'm not good enough, I don't have time for this. What if this happens? All these sort of concerns and worries that we get that make living day to day more difficult. It's not about removing those thoughts or trying not to have them, because they will come. It's about accepting them and then trying to develop an ability to cope with those thoughts and still perform. That is what psychological flexibility is, and that also is what mental toughness is. And to be mentally tough, we're going to speak about three concepts. We're going to speak about mindfulness first and foremost, which is about noticing how you're thinking and feeling. We're really going to link this concept of mindfulness as the first step in being mentally tough and resilient, and doing the things that you want to do. Secondly, we're going to speak about acceptance, and that's really about once you notice that the thoughts and feelings are difficult or challenging, it's about showing up to them and accepting them. So if it's a worry or an anxiety about a phone call you need to make, or an email you need to send, or work that's piling up and it's affecting your well-being, it's about understanding and showing up to that work, not avoiding it, or not avoiding that phone call that you need to make. So we're going to go through that and hopefully give you the tools to do that. Finally then, it's doing what matters. And once we're aware of how we're thinking and feeling, and if it's difficult we can show up to it, then we're in a place where we can do what matters. And with regard to working at home, that might be not going off and doing chores instead of work, which is a constant distraction, or when looking in the fridge, or even completing home workouts. We're going to give you the tools to kind of complete these behaviours more often and have these moments of real mental toughness. Like I've said, the first step in all of this is mindfulness, and it's about noticing just how you're thinking and feeling day to day. Mindfulness, as terms of definition, can be seen as a non-judgmental, present moment awareness. And what we mean by that is when you notice your thoughts, and they could be thoughts of worry, anxiety, we're not going to label those thoughts as bad or good. We're just going to see them for what they are. It's just thoughts. Okay, so we're certainly non-judgmental about our thoughts and our emotions. And then certainly it's about being grounded in the present, the here and now, as I speak to you, listening to the words. It's not thinking ahead about what you're going to have for dinner, or what you're going to do later, or even what you've done previously in the past. So what you did yesterday, or what you've done in the weeks leading up to this. It's simply about thinking about the present moment. So I appreciate some of you may have practiced mindfulness before. There's plenty of good apps out there that can help with mindful practice, but we're going to practice some mindfulness now. So if you want to get nice and comfortable in your chair, just relax your arms and your legs. And as you get comfortable and relaxed, just gently close your eyes for me. And just as you close your eyes, I just want you to really pay attention to any sounds that are occurring inside or outside the room that you're in. So really pay attention to the sounds around you. As you pay attention to those sounds, now just start to think about your breathing and pay attention to that breathing. So feel your chest rise and fall, and also just feel the air flow in through your nose and out through your mouth. As you're feeling that flow of air again, now just start to notice any tension around your body. So notice any tension in your shoulders or other areas of your body. Now once again, just start to pay attention to sounds that are occurring inside or outside the room. So just notice all the sounds around you. And then when you're ready, just open your eyes. So that little centering exercise is quite a simple one, but it really just gets you to pay attention to what's happening in the here and now. So the instructions I was giving, pay attention to the sounds, your breathing, and how your body feels. Those are really good anchors that can anchor us in the present moment. It's really important to notice as well during an exercise like that, did you have any wandering thoughts? So did you think about what you're going to have for dinner? Did you think about what you're going to do later? And did you even have any concerns or doubts about what you're actually doing? What has this got to do with making you more resilient in the workplace? How is this going to make me more resilient? You may have had thoughts like that creep in as well. So it's important to notice these thoughts. And once we notice them, it's important then to pull ourselves back in to breathing or noticing the sounds around us, whatever the instruction, whatever that moment demands. That's what we pay attention to. So really good exercise that you can use, and you can employ this just day to day. So when you get to work or you get to your desk, whether that be at home or not, just spend 30 seconds to a minute just simply deep breathing in and out, and just notice all the thoughts that you're having. Is there frustration there? How is that going to play a role in your day-to-day life? And why is that frustration there? Okay, and when you notice that, pull it back into your breathing. And that'll just allow you to become present moment focused before you start your day. So again, how does this link to mental toughness? Well, this is really, and being more resilient, this is really the first step in noticing how you're thinking and feeling. Because how you're thinking and feeling often impacts upon our behaviours. So we spoke about those behaviours that mentally tough employees do. It's about understanding and breaking the link between any thoughts and emotion and those behaviours. When we're speaking about mindfulness, often when we're at our worst, we're very mindful. So that's lots of thought, lots of anxiety, lots of worry, lots of concern. We're really busy. Our head is really busy. But being mindful is just about being present moment focused and having your attention on one task. We can also talk about mindless. So an example maybe when we're mindless is when we're brushing our teeth in the morning. How often do we actually taste the toothpaste? Okay, how often do we feel the brush going over our gums? Often because we're completely not in the present moment. Okay, we're off thinking about what we need to do that day, what we have to get done, who we need to phone, who we need to make contact with, who we need to just completely not present moment focused, all in the future or often in the past. Okay, so it's important that we're not mindless, and it's important that we're mindful, and this is really the first step in being that resilient person that you want to be. And again, this is just a helpful quote, but you can see and even think from the image that this person is really engaged in what they're trying to do. So be mindful even when your mind is full. Appreciate at this time with the coronavirus pandemic, there'll be lots of challenging thoughts, lots of worries, lots of concerns. And it's not about trying not to think about those, but it's more about accepting they'll come up. But when they do come up, try then paying attention to what's in front of you, what you're doing with regard to your work. And through that process, we can start to become more mentally tough. And as we go through the next few slides, we'll link that to our values. Values can be a really powerful motivator in doing a lot of this work. So don't think about the animal, don't think about the sound it'll make, don't think about the colour, don't think about where it would be. And no doubt we probably thought about a pink elephant. Okay, so it's an unfair exercise, but really it's just to highlight that often we cannot control our thoughts and emotions. We can't control our thoughts. So whether that's thoughts like nerves or excitement, or even difficult thoughts about I can't do this, or I'm not good enough, or don't have time for this. It's not about spending energy trying to not think a certain way. It's more accepting the way you're thinking and feeling, and then moving past it, developing a way to cope. So that's really what that exercise is about. And it's important that when we notice that we've got a difficult thought or a challenging thought, and we all have them, so it could be that I'm crap at my job, and I want you now to go back to those moments where you were crap at your job, that you missed an email, you CC'd someone in an email that shouldn't have been, you missed a meeting, you missed a deadline. I want you to go back and think about that moment where you were crap at your job. And as you do that, just continue to repeat, I'm crap at my job, crap at my job, crap at my job, and continually repeat that. Really go back to that moment where you were crap at your job. Feel everything that comes up, the anxiety, the nerves, the frustration, feel all that as well. And as you're doing that, you're repeating, I'm crap at my job, and now it's about, I notice, I'm thinking that I'm crap at my job. I'm thinking that I'm crap at my job. So continue to repeat that, I'm thinking that I'm crap at my job. Again, you're still there with all the emotion and the thought, and now it's, I notice that I'm thinking I'm crap at my job. I notice I'm thinking that I'm crap at my job. And hopefully what that exercise does, it really starts to get a bit of distance between the thought and you. So rather than I'm crap at my job and that's the rule and that's fact, it's about actually I'm thinking I'm crap at my job. And often that should create a bit of distance, and we're thinking that you're crap at your job because you maybe made a mistake or you've not hit a deadline, and that's we see as completely normal. Everyone who's missed a deadline or missed an email or done something wrong has got this thought. So it's about accepting that this thought will come up, but also that you're just thinking this based on the circumstances that you're in. Okay, and we further remove that thought from ourselves when we say we notice I'm thinking I'm crap at my job. Okay, because once we notice it, we can then pay attention to the present moment and get back in that moment. That's when we're at our best work. So if you think about mindfulness and being in the moment, I'm sure you've had mornings where you've gone into work and you've maybe started at 9 and all of a sudden it's lunch. And you've got through a part of work and you don't even really know what's happened. Okay, that's when we're really mindful. And we want to get there more often because that's when your well-being's increased, that's when your productivity's increased, and you just generally feel better about your job. Okay, so we need to get back in that mindful moment, and we need to get distance from our thoughts, because our thoughts can pull us out of that moment, especially if we treat the thought as a fact. Okay, if we get really fixed with that thought, I'm crap at my job, and that becomes the rule, it becomes really, really difficult to work and to live. So try that, just get some distance from those thoughts. I'm thinking I'm crap at my job. Some other examples that we can have for this, and where thoughts become the rule, just to illustrate a bit more, but maybe it's 3 minutes to 8 in the morning. What time do you get up? Probably 8 o'clock, most people have probably said, but again, that's another rule or another thought that becomes the rule. Okay, you think it's madness to get up at 3 minutes to 8, I'll wait to 8 o'clock, and then that becomes the rule, and that impacts upon our behaviour. So next time you have that thought, just think about being more psychologically flexible, being more flexible around that thought and seeing it for what it is. It's just a thought, you can get up now, okay, and that's going to help you cope with difficult and challenging thoughts that come up throughout the day. Another one might be with regard to a workout at home. Again, with the coronavirus pandemic and being in the house, it's great to exercise and really important that we stay active. But some of the thoughts you might get are, I don't have the equipment, I don't have the time, or it won't be the same. And all of a sudden that thought becomes the rule. I don't have the time, or I don't have the time, or I don't have the equipment, so I'll not do it. And that thought grips us, we become fixed with that thought, and we end up not working right. Okay, so it's really important that we see these thoughts, and if they're challenging, we can accept them and open up to them. And important that if they are the rule, if they become the fact, that we really try and distance ourselves from that, because that's what makes being mentally tough and resilient really difficult, is when you're fixed with these thoughts. So we're now at the stage where we need to notice how we're thinking and feeling. We need to be open. If those thoughts are challenging, we need to be open to experiencing them. And that's going to help us with moments of mental toughness and resilience. Now what we're going to talk about is that active part of this whole technique. So we know we need to be notice how we're thinking and feeling, be open, and now we're going to have that action part. Just before we move to that, another example potentially in the workplace, but those of you that have to do presentations or have done presentations, most people get nervous before them, or a slight feeling of nervousness, and it's important that we acknowledge that. It's not the absence of fear, so the absence of nerves when you present. It's about having the nerves and still presenting well. That's really what mental toughness is about. It's kind of encompassing that quote, courage is mastery of fear, not absence of fear. Again, it's not the fact that they don't feel fearful, it's mastering that fear, being able to cope with that fear. So now we're on to the action part of this process. And what I want you to do now is just think that you're at your work night out, you've won Employee of the Year. Okay, so it's a great night, everyone's on your table, and someone's gone up to speak about you. Okay, that could be a colleague, that could be someone in your family, it could be a boss, but that person's going up to speak to you. For the next 30 seconds, I want you to consider, what would you want that person to say? So what are the things and the phrases that you'd want that person to say about you as a person, and as someone who works as a work colleague? So just spend 30 seconds on that now. some of the phrases that might be coming up are committed, hardworking, fun, reliable, loyal. These are some of the phrases that we can use, and what we're doing here is if we strip everything back, these are the personal values that you hold. This is the person that you want to be. And it's really important that we try and take steps towards that, because ultimately we'll perform at our best, but also we'll feel our best if we're taking steps towards the person we want to be. Okay, and we're going to highlight how you can do that in the next slide. So you've got these values. It could be commitment, it could be hard work, and it's really important to notice when you're moving away from them. So moving away from that person and moving towards them. So we take the example of working from home, and we've got many distractions when we work at home, but often one of them could be doing chores. So you think, I'm just going to go and do this, or I'll take a break and do this. Maybe it's because you've got something quite challenging in work and it's quite difficult and it requires a lot of thought, and you think, no, I'm just going to do something easy and go and do some chores around the house. And it's really important to, again, firstly notice that that's the thought that's coming up. So it's pulled you out of the present moment. Oh, I'm going to go and do this. Okay. And then accept that you will want to do things that are easy. You'll want to tick off things that you can think, I've accomplished that today. But it's much more valuable if you spend time on those difficult things to accomplish, and that could be a really difficult work task. So it's normal that thoughts will pull you away from that difficult task because it's difficult. So we accept that, we notice the thoughts when they come up, and then in that moment, we think about that person that we want to be. What would that hard-working, committed, reliable employee do? What would they do in this moment? And often that's enough then to push us towards just knuckling down and getting down with the task and not going off to do a simple chore just as a distraction because we've got something difficult in front of us and you just think, I'm just going to go off and do that. Okay, so that process of noticing, there's that thought again, pulling me away from what I'm doing. That's normal because what I'm doing is difficult and it requires a lot of thought. But what would that hard-working, diligent, reliable employee do at that moment? And then it should be enough then to continue on with your work. And this is a constant battle back and forth. You'll notice that you get pulled in different directions, but it's always about leaning on these values to guide your behaviour. So again, we talked about chores, but it could even be with the fridge. You're constantly going up to the fridge and having a look and just simply opening the door. Again, that's just a distraction. Okay, so when you notice that mind, oh, I'm going to see if we can get something to eat or have a look in the fridge, just notice it. There's that mind come up again. That's because what I'm doing is maybe boring or it's difficult. That's normal. Sometimes what we do is boring and often difficult. But what would that employee do? What would that ideal employee do? That employee that you want to be, what would they do? And again, that should be enough to guide our behaviour and stay in the moment and continue on with the work. Even with regard to home workouts, it could be things like, oh, I don't have the equipment, or I can't do this. And then again, the importance of being active in this challenging time with regard to the lockdown. It's really, really important that we are active. That's going to really help not only your work productivity, but also your well-being. So when you get those thoughts of, oh, I don't have the equipment, or oh, I can't do it, or just anything that's making doing that workout challenging, just notice it. Notice when it comes up. Accept that, yeah, you don't have the equipment, and yeah, it's difficult and might not have the kind of space for it, might not be ideal. Completely agree, but those are all normal and those are all thoughts that everyone else gets. But in that moment, it's about then thinking about that person you want to be. What would that committed, hard-working, driven person be? What would they do in that moment? And they'd probably accept all those thoughts and then do the workout. Okay, so it's really, really important that we notice when we're moving towards these values and also moving away. Lastly, then, it's about thinking about what is influencing us. So sometimes the story, I'm too tired, can influence us, and it can influence us in a number of ways. So with regard to the workout, it'd be, I'm too tired for this workout. And often being value-driven is more difficult. So if you have that thought of being, I'm too tired, a workout is going to make you more tired, but ultimately you're going to get an amazing satisfaction from it because it's moving towards the person you want to be. And it's also going to enhance that mental toughness. It's going through that process of having a chat, noticing that you've got a challenging thought around working out that you don't want to do it, you feel you're too tired. It's accepting that, yeah, I'm tired and I don't really want to do this, but what's the kind of person I want to be? And it's this sort of person, it's driven, it's hardworking. So in that moment, what would they do? Will they do the workout? And hopefully that then allows us to really get clarity around our thoughts and how they're distance from behaviour. And really, with regard to our behaviour, we should move to that ideal person as much as we can. Really, just to consolidate some of the learning we've got, I want you to think about you in 2 years. So we talk here about being value driven, and that's moving towards, so acting on those values. When we speak about being emotion driven, it's about acting on those thoughts of too tired, I can't be bothered, this is too difficult. All thoughts that are completely normal with a lot of aspects of work. Okay, but I want you to imagine for 2 years you constantly move towards your values. So constantly move towards that person you want to be. Always, when you get that thought, I'm too tired, you always act on your values. Always move towards the committed, hard-working, resilient, fun person you want to be. Okay, and just for 30 seconds, every single choice you make for the next 2 years, you move towards that value-driven direction. I just want you to think about, in 2 years' time, where would you be? What would you look like? Who would you be working for? And ultimately, would you be happy? So have a think about that now. If you were that value-driven person for 2 years, consistently value-driven, where would that place be? What would it look like? And hopefully that's a really happy place that you are. I think this quote kind of sums up what we've been speaking about. It's not hard to make decisions when you know what your values are. We can go back to that example of distractions or chores. You've got a decision to continue with the kind of difficult cognitive work that you're doing, but you go and do that easy win with the chore. It's about understanding that if you know what your values are, that hard-working, committed person, there's no choice to be made. There's no decision to be made. It's just a case of knuckling down and doing that work. Same with regard to the workout, and you've got a decision whether you do it or don't. When you know those values and you lean on those values, that decision becomes really easy. So again, we'll have all these choice points and crossroads throughout the day, whether it's nutrition, whether it's distractions, whether it's home workouts. But it's really important that we try and take that value-driven path. And often that value-driven path is more difficult. You'll experience more challenging thoughts. So if you had the thought, I'm tired before the workout, you're going to get it more during the workout. But ultimately, it's about being and moving closer to the person you want to be. And that's what I really encourage you to do over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, is really get clear with those values, and at every opportunity you can, think about moving towards them. Okay, there'll be a number of challenging thoughts and they will come up, but it's about accepting them, firstly noticing them, then accepting them, taking the steps to be value driven. So just some things to think about in terms of practical applications, and those mindful moments in the morning, there are apps to kind of help with this, but just before you get to your desk, just spend a minute just breathing and paying attention to your breathing. And notice all the thoughts that are going through your head and just pull them back into your breathing. Just pull that attention back into your breathing, and that'll really set you up for the day. Secondly, it's about showing up to those challenging thoughts and feelings. So hopefully today you've got an understanding that everyone has challenging thoughts and feelings, and it's not about trying to not feel a certain way to do what you want to do. It's about feeling in a challenging and difficult way and still doing what you want to do. So hopefully that's something that you can work on and notice those thoughts and really show up to them if you can. Make those towards moves. So how many towards moves can you make this week? How many times can you move towards those values that you and that person that you want to be? How many times can you do that this week? And it's just about building them into your working day. So if your values, write them on a sheet of paper and pin them up, or have them as your phone screen. Every time you get distracted on your phone, if you've got that value there to make you aware, you'll often put your phone down and get back to your work. And a lot of this is to do with just improving your well-being and your performance at work. Those are both interrelated. So if you're really being successful and productive at work, that's going to have a massive impact, a positive impact on your well-being. The same with any distractions that you're having and home workouts. If you can cope with all the challenges that are associated with that behavior and still do it, then you're going to enhance your well-being and also your mental toughness. So just some really take-home points to finish. Be present and notice your thoughts and feelings. That's the first step, is noticing, right, what am I thinking and feeling, and how does that play a role in my behavior? If it's a difficult thought and emotion, show up to it. Pin your shoulders back and really show up to it. Be willing to experience those difficult emotions. And then be value driven. Think about that person you want to be, take steps towards it. Like anything, this requires practice, and it is proactive. This is a process of going through that, being present, showing up, and doing what matters, and constant repetitions of this. And that's what allows you to be more mentally tough and enhance not only your work productivity, but also your well-being. You must reflect and learn. So have a think, what are the common difficult stories for you? Is it I'm too tired? Is it I can't be bothered? Is it I'm not good enough? what are the common challenging stories that we get? We all have them, and some show up more than others. So it's about understanding what's your common story and then thinking about ways to cope with that. And also the stock market of life. So we're going through a really challenging and uncertain period of time at the minute, and we must acknowledge that. So some of the work that we're speaking about, advice we're giving, won't always work. And it's not a case of saying that this value-driven approach isn't working. It's just a case of that things are really difficult at the minute. This is a constant battle between your values and your emotions and your feelings. So you won't always win. So any times that you may have a dip or you're feeling challenging, you do give in to just sitting on the sofa, that's fine. It's just about reflecting on this, reflecting and learning from it. So when you're thinking you're too tired to make dinner, and then you order a takeaway, have a think about, is that the person I want to be? I know it tastes good, I know it's great, I know it's easier, but is it the person I want to be? Okay, and reflecting and learning like that can have a real impact. But it's important that you keep going even when things are challenging, and then there will be challenges. Thank you very much for listening to this seminar. If you want any more support or want any more knowledge around this approach, or any support around nutrition, training, or indeed physiotherapy, my email's on the screen. Again, you can contact us on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter at Athlete Focused, and also at www.athletefocused.com. I really appreciate your time, and have a great day. Stay safe.